Welcome to Developing your Research Agenda, a strategic plan for funding your research. I am Karen Fletcher. I'm the Director of Grants, Resources, and Services in the Office of Research.
And I'm Katie Shoaf. I'm the Associate Director for Grants, Resources, and Services in the Office of Research. And let's go ahead, Karen.
We're just excited that you're here today. We are going to go through a presentation, and then we are going to be sending you some resources at the end. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or just go ahead and interrupt us. This is pretty informal, even though it's a Zoom, and you're welcome to do that. And I'll let you get started, Katie.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And as Karen mentioned, we're pretty informal. So as questions come up, please drop them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll take a second and call on you to clarify anything. We're also available after the session to meet with you one-on-one if you'd like a deeper dive into how to establish or set up or plan your own research agenda. So today what we're really going to be talking about, as you can see from our title slide, and what I'm sure the reason you signed up for this workshop is that we're going to be talking about how to establish your own research agenda. And the focus we want to take today is really focusing on how you can be strategic in that planning of your research agenda. It's kind of like developing a strategic plan in miniature for your specific research trajectory. And what we're going to be talking about today is how you sort of weave that into your bigger career plan as well. And so we like to think of a research agenda as a roadmap to help you have a plan that can help you make deadlines for yourself, that can help you give something that's actionable and digestible for you to move forward in your crazy, messy lives as faculty members, where you're balancing research, teaching, and service, and your home lives, your personal lives as well. So what we want to think about is this is a tool for you to use time efficiently, to think about your long-term and your short-term goals, on how you're going to build up your research expertise, the collaborations you're going to build, the grants you might be seeking for yourself, and building upon your current publication record and possibly your dissertation work, depending on what point in your career that you are. So we also want to emphasize that this isn't about just getting one grant. One grant is a great place to start. It's a great goal, whether that's an internal college level grant or an internal Office of Research level grant. We want to talk about this is more about how you think long-term think long-term in terms of building up a platform for your success, so that you are giving yourself a solid base from which to jump off of in terms of your research career goals, so that you can make progress in your academic career. So I mentioned a couple of these things already, but a research agenda, just to clarify, again, we want to think about it as a roadmap. It's a roadmap. It's a plan for you to sort of use as a guiding structure for how you are going to strategically approach your research, your scholarly endeavors, your scholarly or your creative endeavors. And it should be realistic, right? So what you don't want to do is put all of your giant, huge hopes and dreams on there. You do, but they need to be strategized and stratified in a way that you can take bite-sized chunks out of these steps to your long-term goals, so that you can actually be successful and continue feeding and adjusting your research agenda. It's a time management tool. And above all, it's an important exercise for you to do, to take, in addition to this session, it is a good starting point after this to take some time to really reflect on your career goals. We don't take a lot of time to really sit down and think strategically and reflect on how we're going about achieving our academic career goals all the time. A lot of times we're very reactive. We're trying to just keep the fires out and keep our heads above water. And I know that a lot of us have been struggling with that feeling sort of in general with the pandemic. And so it's good to make time intentionally for a pause, to reflect back on what it is that you have done already. What sort of things have you already put in your arsenal for being successful? And how are you going to move forward? And what are the best things to say yes to moving forward and to really prioritize moving forward? So a research agenda is not the same for everyone. All of you on this call are completely different from one another and unique from one another, and you're different from everybody we've worked with in the past, which is great. And so that means that your research agendas are all going to look wildly different, and they should. They are supposed to be unique to you and tailored to you, and a tool for you to use. They're not static. You will need to adjust this as more information comes in. You learn about different programs, priorities may change in the federal government. Your responsibilities as a faculty member may change. Your family situation may change. There's lots of stuff going on in your life. And so this plan is not meant to be this in concrete, in ink, permanent forever thing. It is a starting point for you to ebb and flow and to adjust as needed as you're moving forward in your career. And it should be sort of realistic, right? You should have some big time goals in there, but you should also have some smaller achievable things to help drive you forward in those little successes, so you can celebrate the small wins as you're building a generous research presence in your field. So again, we've mentioned some of these, but this is important to know, like why would you take the time to reflect on your research agenda? That might seem self-evident to Karen and I, since this is a big part of our work, is supporting you in this, but it's an important exercise to do because it not only gives you a strategic plan for your research, and I'm a big fan of strategic planning when it's done appropriately and implemented appropriately, but it can help you be more productive, right? So if you have something on your schedule, if you've built time into it, if you've written it down and you have given yourself, if you've made it, spoken it into the universe, it gives you the opportunity to succeed and be a little bit more productive. Of course, contributing to research and conducting research and publishing helps you move your discipline forward. In terms of the knowledge enterprise, you're helping to generate that knowledge and helping to drive the field forward, and that's exciting as well. It can keep you sane, right? It doesn't, if you have an intentional plan around your research, even if it doesn't go exactly like you thought it would, it can help you feel a little bit more grounded in knowing that you do have a plan and you can go backwards if you need to, and you can refer back to it and say, well, at least I have a handle on what I've done so far. And at least, even if my stuff was derailed this week or this month or this year, I know I can try again. And you have points to sort of hold on to and cling to as points of reference and points of sanity. And again, it gives you a specific prioritized direction to work towards, and that can help you really direct your energy instead of sort of grasping at things as they fly through the air, trying to catch those dollar bills as they emerge from the fan machine. You can be like, okay, well, I know this grant is coming up and I know I'm going to work on it, instead of just trying to react to things as they come down. Being prepared and having a timeline for yourself can be really, really helpful in sort of focusing your energy. And obviously at Appalachian, we're really proud of integrating our students into our research and also bringing our research directly to the classroom. So if you're teaching students and you are conducting research that is relevant and timely, and you have a solid handle on where you're going or where you hope to go in terms of your research, that can increase your pedagogy, right? It can help you teach. You're bringing up to the minute information to your students in the classroom, and that can get them really excited about their own work and their own contributions and their learning as well. You're muted, Karen.
Thank you. Always, at least once. Hopefully we've convinced you that this is a great idea, or maybe you were already convinced because you showed up today. But so what does it look like, and what kinds of things would you consider as you're putting this together? So to kind of look at it from a bird's eye point of view of what you'd be putting together and what you would be considering, is that from left to right on this screen, you want to develop your research agenda while you're also developing your education agenda. A lot of the times when you're writing a grant proposal, the two are very easily married together. Sometimes there is an education component to a grant proposal. If you are involving your students, as Katie just mentioned, that is something you can write into your research agenda. The things that you want to consider that you would include in this research agenda while you're creating it, and possibly your education agenda at the same time, is you want to determine the expectations for research funding in your department. Do you know what those are right now? Have you had conversations with your chair or with other colleagues in your department? They are not the same in every department. And so what are the things that you need to consider to do in order to be up for P&T, to make sure that you're doing the things you need to do at the right times? You might be interested in doing research, but what needs to come, the cart before the horse, what needs to come first, so that you could have time to focus on your research during your research agenda time. So what some of the things that you also want to find out is who is going to fund the research that you're interested in. So you find out that, hey, NSF is someone who's going to look in, there is a directorate in NSF, the National Science Foundation, and they fund the area of my science. So then you want to start following that directorate. Find out that, hey, there's a foundation that actually is interested in my work. Start following that foundation. Does your work have any kind of corporate interest? Is it something that you want to be able to market at some time? Start following those industries. If you don't need an industry to do your work, really look at those foundations and those federal agencies that will fund your work over time, because you're going to need to be working with them at different times. And that's how you'll want to slot them in as you look at your research agenda and plan it out over the next few years. So once you find those funding agencies, what are specific funding opportunities that are available? So you know that this area is something that these funding agencies will fund, but are there specific funding opportunities that come out on an annual basis? Maybe there's something that is due every December 13th. Maybe it's due every March 4th. And so you'll want to look at those and be prepared. If it's an annual solicitation, then you can prepare a year in advance. They say it takes about 6 to 9 months to put together a really well done proposal that can be competitive. So you'll want to add that time frame in. If it's something that's got 90 days out and is a deadline, you will be more prepared if you are following these funding agencies, because you'll know that something's coming up and you'll have an opportunity to even get those one-off funding opportunities. Are collaborators something in your future? Is this something where you need collaborators for your research and scholarship? Is this something that's just really you? Is this something where you just might want to bring in a specialist every once in a while? If you feel like you want a collaborator, you start looking at who is also doing this in your area, write them down, plan to reach out at some time. You also want to do a little bit of homework about what you need to do to be competitive. And that homework can be looking at your funding agency and seeing what they funded before, asking us in Grants, Resources, and Services if we can get our hands on a funded proposal, so that you can see what people are doing in that area. Obviously, literature reviews, finding out what's being published in the area, becoming a reviewer for some of these funding agencies so you can see what makes a competitive proposal, and then also just writing. It's practice. So you schedule writing this proposal so that you have time, make time. Are you someone who can do it just an hour a day or an hour a week? Or do you need a block of time, 3 hours a week? Do you need a writing circle? Find other people who are interested in writing at the same time. Start an affinity group, or say, hey, Grants, Resources, and Services, I'm really interested in this NSF directorate. Do you think there's anyone else on campus? And we can reach out and see if we can start an affinity group that meets and can talk about the subject and review grant proposals. So there's a lot of different things that you can do as you prepare and as you plan and as you create this research agenda for 3 to 5 years. It's always something you're going to revisit, as Katie had mentioned. And then also after you have submitted a proposal, and it takes 2.4 sometimes, 2.4-ish times they say, the research says, to submit a proposal and you get declined until you actually get that proposal. So expect between 2 and 3 times that you'll be resubmitting your proposal, just like when you submit an article, you get reviews and you resubmit. And so that's what you'll be doing with your proposal as well. Learn from the reviews. It's never easy to be declined, but that's something they want to fund you. And if they've given you reviews, they'll help you with that. Some of the things that you can think about as you're developing your research agenda are, is this area of research something that you're passionate about, something that you'll want to do every morning when you get up, something that you'll want to do in 3 to 5 years, something that you can, that there are things happening in the world that you can follow that will make it exciting when you sit down and work on this, because that's what's going to have to compel you forward. If you're really thinking 3 to 5 years out, what's going to get you to that 3rd or 5th year? Is there enough there to make you keep going? Then if it is in that area, do you have a publication record in it already? Are you working towards that? It's about 3 publications in the area that you are studying. That makes you competitive for a federal grant award. So think about that. Are you working on your first one? Okay, so how long will it take to get another one out? And then when did you want this funding on a grant proposal? Or how does that work into P&T? And then what other kinds of things? Do you need collaborators? Do you need to do research in order to get this publication? And that research requires you to have access to equipment that's not here. So what needs to happen then? So what kinds of things do you need to get those publications out? And then what's the impact of this research that you're doing? If it's something you're excited about, you're enthusiastic, the energy is up for this, how can you explain the impact? And if you can explain the impact, that's going to help you when you talk about it in grant proposals and in articles, things that show that this is going to propel you forward, propel your students forward, propel the discipline forward. Or is your research already in a well-researched area and the progress is incremental? And then how do you explain that as you move your research forward, and how much of an impact does your research have incrementally, and why is that important? So it fits all the different areas you may be in. Just start asking questions about it. That will lead you to, oh, well, maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need a collaborator to move forward this piece because it is only incremental and I want to do a large leap. And just start thinking through those things. So now we're going to go into really more thoughts about your career trajectory, and we're going to give you things to think about and how you can plot yourself into where you are now and where you want to be. Katie?
So yes, so what we're going to talk about is so this career arc, this is some arcs of a rainbow here, and this is meant to sort of give you a zoomed out picture of all of the things that you have to juggle as an academic, a professional academic. So in your role professionally, there are lots of stuff that you have to focus on. So teaching, sponsors, professional societies, conferences, publications, funding, and research. And this probably doesn't even actually cover everything that you have to do. There's service to the organization. There's ad hoc committees that you have to serve on that aren't included here. And then aside from all of this, you are a real human person with a family and a personal life, allegedly. And you need to figure out how to balance that as well. And a work-life balance is hard to achieve, especially for academics. And so we're going to be focusing on each of these arcs sort of in brevity, and then we'll go into depth on a few of them specifically that grants, resources, and services can really support you in, and that focus on your research agenda. But we want to touch on all of these because all of these are part of you as an academic professional. And so this image sort of shows us what you plan. So you have this planned, beautiful rainbow plan of what you hope to do with your research. And when I mentioned at the beginning that your research agenda is aspirational to a point, but you're hoping that it's realistic. But under the rainbow, there are these dark forces afoot. Things happen completely out of our control, like COVID-19, and other things happen, like developments in your field and technological developments and change in politicians and political leans and priorities of funding areas. So these all things are out of your control for the most part. And so those could have a really big impact on what your planned career trajectory is. And so the difference between what you plan to do and what you actually do is probably significant, but that should not stop you from actually doing the work that you hope to do. So we're going to talk about how to best establish the plan for most success and what to be thinking about in terms of each of these things. So this trajectory, so these arcs are sort of meant to be looked at in terms of a time. So on the left is early in your career and on the right is later in your career. And that's how they're meant to be looked at. What you want to be thinking about for yourself is where you are currently on this arc of left to right in terms of time. So when you're beginning to teach, you may be teaching courses as assigned. You may be in a department that goes as far as to provide you a standardized syllabus for the courses that you're teaching. And then as you advance, you may be able to move on to teaching courses that you like or that you propose. And maybe then you move to teaching more higher level courses in your area. And so your interests eventually dictate what it is you're teaching. You have an area of expertise. And so maybe you're teaching gen ed courses at the beginning, or maybe even later in your career, but you find out more as you advance and grow as an academic to what your particular expertise and area of interest means for those courses and how you're implementing what you've learned in your own research and scholarship, and by keeping up with others in the field, how that implements and impacts your pedagogy. So your teaching is like your day job. It's what you do. You come in and you educate students. And that's a big part of your job. But thinking about how the work that you do in research impacts your teaching is an important part as well.
So the next arc we're going to look at is professional societies. Some of you may be involved, some of you may be very involved, and some of you may just be starting out and maybe not involved at all. So depending on where you fall on this arc, think about it. Where do you fall right now? Where do you want to fall? Are they in the same place? So are you a member right now and you really would like to stay a member because that's all you can handle? And that's great. You're going to professional conferences and learning what's going on. Or do you want to get more involved and look at a leadership opportunity, which will also serve you in other capacities? And that could be something in a section or a chapter. Do you want to go internationally? What would it take for you to get there? Are there international professional societies that would help you with your area of scholarship and research? Do you aspire to hold a leadership role like a president or a secretary or a treasurer? Is that something that fits into where you want to be in a few years or farther? And what steps, as you're putting together this agenda, what steps do you need to take? Is it meeting other people, being more of an extrovert at meetings and going to those Zoom happy hours on Zoom conferences to meet more people in order to get more engaged? And then what kinds of things do you want to give back, and how will that serve your purposes? So just questions to consider as you look at where you could be and where you want to be, and find out if those are close or far apart.
And so conferences kind of goes hand in hand with professional societies, mostly because professional societies are the people that are hosting conferences. And another thing to remember with all of these arcs is that because they all belong in the same rainbow, which is your career, and you are driving this train, right? You are making these choices. You are setting the plan for yourself. you have to figure out what things to say yes to. And the things that you say yes to and that you prioritize need to serve you in some way professionally. And I am a chronic overcommitter, and I say yes to everything all the time, or I did. I'm really working very hard in my therapy and my own life to minimize the things I say yes to, or to maximize the effectiveness of the things that I say yes to. And so that's the same for this. We're talking about a lot of stuff here. So are you going to take on more courses? Are you going to try to develop new courses? Are you going to get more engaged in your professional society? Are you going to voluntarily be a leader in that? Are you going to speak and attend at conferences? Are you going to attend at conferences? Are you going to speak at conferences? Are you going to plan a conference? Are you going to conference co-chair? Are you going to be an invited speaker someday? These all can be helpful elements for you as a professional. And to some extent, all of these things probably play into it. But you have to prioritize and think about, in terms of your research agenda, how these things can fit in to help you achieve your goal without overcommitting yourself. You can't do all the things. You can try, but you may not succeed. And at what cost, right? So thinking about making sure that you're maximizing what is good for you and what is good for your career and the things that you choose to prioritize. So conferences are a great way to both get your research out there and to network with people and to engage with your professional societies. And it would be nice to be worked up to being invited to speak for something and serving as a conference chair. But those are big time commitments, right? And so maybe you don't have time for that at this point in your career. And you're like, well, maybe that's more of a 5-year plan for me, is to work up to something like that. And maybe it's never part of your plan to plan a conference. But just thinking about what role you want to play and how you are going to advance or grow those roles, or if they're fine being static where you are on the trajectory, as well, is important.
So adding on another layer, this is something that we talked about, is having publications probably important to your P&T, as well as in order to get funding, you need to have a publication record. So where do you fall in this level of the ARC? And is this something where you are submitting the amount of papers that you feel comfortable submitting? Do you need to submit more in order to reach where you need to be for P&T? Are you right on track? Plan it out. Are there things where you aspire to be on an editorial board? What do you need to do to get there? Is it talking to specific people? Is there an application process? Do you need recommendations? And then what's the next step? Is this, where do you want to fall? Do you want to be the editor-in-chief someday of the publications that are relevant in your field? Are there multiple publications that are relevant to your field? Are there ones where you just want to make sure that you're aware of them? What do you need to be paying attention to? So all just more questions about what do you need to be aware of to get where you want to be? So just think of where you are now on this arc and where you might want to go, and we'll move on to the next arc.
Hold on, before you go, just to mention that for resources for publications, our library has a ton of resources to support you, whether you are submitting publications, if you're looking for good, reputable, open access journals, if you are interested in knowing who on campus serves as editors for current journals, you can find that out too. They collect that data and share it. And they also have support for getting your research, your publications reviewed internally, and repositories for where you can keep your publications in an archive that's safe and well documented. And then the other thing on here that I want to mention is serving as a reviewer. You may have already done this. Sometimes you're tapped as an expert to serve as a reviewer, but a lot like we will mention here soon, serving as a reviewer for a funding agency, reading good publications helps you become a better writer of good publications. And the same is true for funding agencies and reviewing proposals. So that's a great opportunity. If you have not already done it, I would encourage you to find out how you can. And contacting the editors of those journals is usually a good place to start. So I mentioned at the beginning that we will be talking about these 3 bolded and brighter rainbow arcs more in depth, because this is what we do. So the Office of Research here is, we exist to support you and help you be successful in your research and creative activity endeavors. And so a lot of that is learning how to navigate engagement with sponsors, and sponsors is funding agencies, talking about funding and what types of funding you might want to be looking for and how to build up a diverse funding portfolio for yourself, and how to sort of grow from smaller grants to bigger grants and things like that. And then same with how that impacts your research, the actual knowledge that you are developing and contributing to your field. So we're going to talk a little bit more about each of these things in depth. So sponsors is, a big part, understanding what funding agencies support your work. And Karen talked about this earlier, but it is really important that you understand and sort of learn about what sponsors support your type of research and your type of scholarly work. A way to do this is to find out who's funding the work that is being published in your field, and who your colleagues are supported by, and your mentors and things like that. But some of it's just some good old-fashioned Googling or using our funding databases to sort of see what funding agencies are out there that support the keywords that are relevant to your work. So the first 2 things on here, and engaging with funding agencies, that's what this slide is really about, is how to engage with funding agencies to support your career. And we really encourage these things, is serving as a reviewer. And serving as a reviewer is important because, and like Karen mentioned before, part of what we do is we can help give you a sample proposal. And that's a great way. That's also like a first step to this. Reading a sample proposal is reading a good proposal and knowing that it was funded. A good proposal, a funded proposal, is not a perfect proposal. And there are no perfect proposals, right? Just like there's no perfect dissertations. A perfect dissertation is a done dissertation. So thinking about how you can engage with these sponsoring agencies to help elevate your own success in funding and your research is important. So serving as a reviewer is a great opportunity for this. We have an internal peer review panel that at Appalachian. So if you're interested in that, you can let me know. You do not have to be funded to serve on it. You do not have to have any experience as a reviewer to serve on it, but it's a great way to get your foot in the door in terms of reading proposals, and you learn what's good and what isn't good and what really matters in terms of conveying your impact to a non-specialist. And then most funding agencies have the opportunity for you to volunteer as a reviewer. You can submit your CV and say, hey, I have an expertise in this, and I would love to be included in a review panel. Some of them you have to apply to, some of them have an open call for reviewers. So engaging with that review process can really build your own expertise in what a good grant proposal looks like, but can also grow your reputation as a professional in the field. So you engage with that funding agency, they'll say, oh, I know that Katie is a reviewer for us. And so she does good review work and she's considerate and critical. And so she might be a good, if they see your name come through for a funding proposal, that may elevate your opportunity to be looked at more seriously as well. And you can always work up to being a program officer. That's something you want to do. We have several folks on campus who have served terms as program officers at the NSF, for example, the National Science Foundation. We have folks that are on standing review panels for the Department of Education, certain grants as well. So we have folks on campus with this expertise. And if you're interested in talking to them, we can put you in touch with those folks as well.
The next arc we're going to look at is funding. So we've talked about the preparation of getting to the point of writing a grant proposal. We've touched on that a little bit. And so some of the things that you want to think about are, where do you fall now? Where do you want to fall? And where do you need to get there? So we say that internal grants and seed funding for your pilot programs is a great way to start, because that gives you some data that you can put in the larger grants. You're not going to get $1 million grant out the gate. If that happens, please let us know. That'll be a first time. But they want to see incrementally how you've built up so that they can trust you with that $1 million, and that you know what you're doing, that you're able to run a team, and that you've got that research background, the pilot data, you know what to do with the larger data when you get it for the $1 million grant. Internal grants are something that you can find on campus. The Office of Research offers quite a few. The University Research Council grant is up to $5,000, and that's offered in the fall and the spring, and that's open to any applicant, faculty or staff on Appalachian State's campus. There are also internal grants that may be offered through your college. So please check out with your department chair or your colleagues what is offered through the college. There is unfortunately no place right now that lists all of them available on campus. There's also the Chancellor's Innovation Grant Program that runs out of the Chancellor's office. So many different opportunities. Just talk around, and if you're interested in any of the Office of Research opportunities, it is on the Office of Research website, and we can absolutely talk to you more about those. If you're interested, just let us know. Once you have one or two of those under your belt, maybe a small foundation grant. Sometimes those are a little bit easier to get depending on what you're going after, what foundation you're going after. You can start looking at a few larger ones. Maybe you'll be a co-PI on a grant proposal so that you can get some of that experience without having to be the one who writes everything and submits it, because that can be a little intimidating. You might be able to learn a little bit from ins and outs of someone who has been a PI on a larger grant, and then you can learn from them. Great way to meet more collaborators too, as you are a co-PI in a project. So think smaller, just begin, and then you grow larger in what you need to do. Also think about how large of a grant do you need? Are you in a discipline that does need $1 million? Are you in a discipline where, you know what, 25,000 would be great, or 50,000 is really the max you need? Fellowships might be what you really need to do your research and to grow your scholarship. So what are those? And do you need to build up to larger ones? There are ones that are more prestigious that you might want to go after. So doing a little bit of research on those and reaching out to the faculty who have already received those, finding out if you need to be recommended for some of those, some of those honors. But if you do need some large grant money and you're looking for how to get to something like a center or training grant where you're actually running a center on a campus, you start writing those grant proposals. Again, it takes around 2.4 times to get a grant that is awarded to you. So that means that you're going to be writing a lot, you're going to be revising a lot, and you're going to be submitting a lot. How many are you going to submit a year in order to get your first one? And it is about perseverance, right? We are always there to cheerlead you on, because it is a process. It is not a one and done thing. And then once you receive a grant, you'll want to be looking in the future. So do you have a 1-year grant? Do you have a 3-year grant? The first ones are probably going to start out as 1-year grants. And then the larger ones might be 3 to 5 years. So when that 3rd year runs around in a 5-year grant, start thinking, what's my next step? How am I going to fund the next part of the project? How am I going to keep these graduate students or undergraduates paid when we move on? So that you will end up writing grants as you have grants, and who do you need on your team to make sure that that happens, so that, eventually, and part of what Katie was mentioning in the prior slide about being a reviewer, and if you've been a reviewer, you're kind of a common name in the agency that you apply to, you've submitted a few grants, been awarded, the sponsor may eventually say, hey, we have $25,000 left to give out. For some reason, they sometimes have extra money at the end of the year that they have to spend. And if they know about you and your research, and they have confidence in what you're doing, and they're excited about the impact that you have, you might get a call one day and then say, hey, I have $25,000 to give out. I'm giving out small increments, but I want to give it to you. Will you send me a 1-page white paper or thought paper, 1-page thought paper on what it is you could do with this, or can I fund a graduate student for you? So getting to that point, super exciting. Is that something where you want to be, and how can you build those relationships in order to get some of those funding opportunities?
And an important part here as well that fits in with your funding in your career. All of this is about a research agenda, right? So I want to make sure that we're coming back to this research agenda. We're talking about all of these things, and it can get easy to be like lost in the weeds about, oh God, I have so much to think about and so much to plan, and how am I going to do it all? This is why you do a research agenda. So you intentionally have time to think about and know that these things are coming up, so they're not shocking, and you're mitigating the overwhelmingness that you may feel. And the other thing is that a lot of these, so like the early career and young faculty grants on the left and invited opportunities on the right, the difference between those is that there's time invested in each of those, right? And so the early career ones, you need to know when you're, if there are any in your field that you are interested in, and when the expiration date is for your eligibility. And so knowing that if you need to apply 2 or 3 times to be considered, making sure you know, okay, well, this opportunity expires when I'm 10 years out from my PhD. So where am I on that trajectory? Do I only have time to apply once? Do I have time to apply a couple of times, and then prioritize based on that? And then the invited opportunities, that's when it's good for you to have set aside some time already to write down a white paper or a thought paper about what it is you're interested in, and kind of have one on deck for all major projects that you think about, because you never know when those opportunities might come through. And if you're well prepared and established further along in your career, if you are ready to just turn around a quick 1-pager to a program officer who is offering you extra funding, then you can be more prepared to do that without being like, oh gosh, I've got to get this together right now. So sort of thinking about this arc in terms of time and building these into your research agenda so that you have sort of a stepping stone plan of knowing when these deadlines are, knowing when the thresholds are for certain eligibility requirements, knowing what publication requirements are for your funding agencies, so that you can sort of leverage all of these things to help build you forward as strategically as possible. Sometimes it's all a little bit of herding cats and floating around in outer space trying to make the best of it. But to the extent possible, we want to provide you with some structure. So you can go to the next slide, Karen. So this arc is about research. And so the point of developing the actual content of your work. So this is your field, this is your expertise, this is the questions that you are asking, and how do you sort of stack those? You learned a lot about this in your graduate work. So developing research questions, hypotheses, creative proposals, things like that. You talked about all of those things. And so you start out with this passion on the left, and you want to sustain that. Karen made the point earlier that you need to really like what you're studying, because if you don't, it's going to show and you're going to be miserable, and you don't want to be miserable. The whole point of this is to help you be successful and happy. And so you need to sustain that passion, but obviously things are going to change. You're not going to be working on your dissertation topic forever, or if you are, it's going to get deeper or broader or have some other different application than it originally did. And so thinking about how to leverage resources and work plans to think about where you want your research to go. And of course, external things can happen, those dark forces afoot. COVID could happen, and then you may shift your whole thing to an online delivery system somehow. What if you work with human subjects? How are you going to engage with them? Are you going to engage with them remotely? Do you need to be in contact with them? How are you going to deliver artistic content? We had an awesome presentation last week about a theater group that did a play on Zoom, and like, how does that change? So there's lots of implications and things that you can't control, but you could still have some sort of vision about where your research can go and what the broader impacts are for your work, and like what it can mean for your field. And you should always be thinking about that, right? Like, what's the why for your work? And so a lot of that is about establishing yourself. So whether you are setting up a lab, you are making contacts with your local community partners that you might need to if you're getting established at a new university, getting seed funding to help you sort of, again, put down roots and really confirm some data that you might have in hand already, or have been reading about. And then you want to develop some initial projects about that. And then there may be sub questions that come out of those things. And you want to be building up to be able to give yourself freedom to explore those things. So maybe that's building your research team. Maybe you're going to hire graduate students or undergraduates, or maybe even a postdoc at some point to help support your lab so that you're freed up to delve a little bit deeper into some of those things. And then on the other side, if you don't have a lab and you are doing community outreach work or artistic work, who are your partners that you're going to leverage with to support the dissemination of your work to the community? And how are you going to make your research matter and get it out there for the world to consume?
So we've finished all of the arcs, very overwhelming. There's a lot of things to consider, as well as the stuff in the arcs we didn't even talk about, which Katie had mentioned, about the other things in your life that are surrounding what goes on every day. But really what we wanted to give you are some things to think about and consider where you are now, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there. And we will be sending you these slides so you can review the arcs and spend some more time on where you believe you are and where you want to go. We encourage you, stick a line in there where promotion and tenure is, so that you can say, okay, these things are going to happen before, after, during, middle, however you want it to look. We do encourage you to make it as interactive as possible. Print out the arcs and really work with them. Add things that we might not have put in there. Again, everyone is different. As Katie mentioned at the beginning, there is no one size fit all. We put in some general milestones, but there might be other things in there. You also might be like, hey, I want to start a family. I'm going to stick in there, in 2 years, I'd like to have a kid, or I'm going to have another kid in 2 years. I'm already expecting, what are those kinds of things that could affect that? And then if there's anywhere where you're like, hey, I'm here, I want to be here, and I have no idea how to get there or who to ask or what to do, please feel free. As Katie mentioned in the beginning, we are happy to meet with you and work this out in a worksheet, talk it out, brainstorm. We're here to assist you in becoming as competitive as possible as you move forward in your research careers. We'll also be sending you a grant readiness assessment form, which is just kind of a yes, no type of form that says breaks it down into categories so that you can say, okay, in order to be ready for a grant, I should have 5 of these things and I have 1 of them. So maybe I should have more, like maybe I have 1 publication and I need at least 2 more. So just something, again, to get you thinking, use it as a tool. And they'll also send you a grant readiness planning worksheet, which is really set up as this slide is. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how will you get there? To really think through, okay, these are the steps I need. So when I'm thinking about my research agenda in years 2 and 3, that might be, I'm going to reach out to people who have grants successfully funded in these areas so I can talk to them, so that I can learn what their successes are. What maybe it's that you want to try to find a mentor in a certain area and you can decide, hey, that's what I want to do this year for the rest of the year. That's what I'm going to concentrate on, or I'm ready for a grant right now. Or maybe I just need to do lit review to get ready for my next publication. Just wanted to get you guys thinking about some next steps, what you can write down, and wanted to give you the tools for that. So we will be sending those to you, and we'll be very excited to talk through any of this with you in the future. Feel free to reach out to us if you would like to set up a meeting. Again, I'm Karen Fletcher. Katie Shoaf has been talking with you, and we also have Lauren Essick, who is our proposal development specialist, and she can help you find some funding if you're at the stage of, I know I want to write a grant proposal. I have no idea where to start. We're here to help you through that as well. We're here to provide any resources we possibly can. So we look forward to hearing from you if you need us.
Yeah. And so again, thank you all for spending time with us today. A lot of what we've talked about has been circling around funding and finding funding, and you may not be ready for that, but you may be, or you may be sort of on the fence of funding seems like this really overwhelming, daunting thing and you're not sure you want to go there, again, we would love to talk to you. Developing your research agenda is about more than funding. We spend a lot of time talking about that because we are here to support you in that pursuit of funding, if that is of interest to you. But we want you to be successful in your research, no matter what that means. And again, everybody's trajectory looks quite different. We talk to a lot of people about fellowships and Fulbrights. We're a big proponent of that as well. And so we want to help all of you be successful and whatever that looks like for you. And so please know that this is a skill building tool for you to use to be successful. And we would love to talk to you more about it one-on-one if that is of interest to you. So again, thank you so much for your time today and appreciate you coming by.